folks. I'm Herb Stevenson. This is Natural Passages, revealing the unmarked doors of life. I have a guest, Ken Chapin. Ken, would you like to say something?
Yeah, hey, my name's Ken Chapin. I'm an artist and designer, uh, hunkered down in chilly southern Colorado. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to join on your podcast and dive into what I hope is a cool conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I appreciate you coming on, but I appreciate also you coming up with a subject. To give a little background, Ken and I have known each other for at least 20 years, and he's been through the Natural Passages men's program. Um, so we periodically touch base, but he came up with a phrase that just intrigued me, which he called "sleight of self." And we hope they're gonna have a conversation from it because it can either be like sleight of hand, which is magic or hidden, or it can be slighting people. And so, from a healing presence point of view, it seemed like a lively conversation for us to have. So, Ken, it was your phrase. I appreciate you bringing it up, and whatever thought you got, let's go for it.
Yeah. Well, this phrase "slide of self" just sort of fell out of my mouth when we were, sitting in a group at the last men's retreat. And I don't know where it came from, but it hasn't left me since. And so I've spent a lot of time sort of thinking about my own experience and talking with the guys, um, about their experience of what is slide of self, and my hope today is to sort of walk away with a deeper understanding of what slide of self can look like, then maybe tease that apart a little bit. And how does one go from uh, deceiving oneself or others, playing small, limiting beliefs, and move through that? Um, and maybe that's, I can imagine presence being a big part of that. At least that has been uh, in my own journey with this. But uh, so, yeah, so from my experience, um, as you mentioned, we've known each other for 20 years, and it would be difficult for me to articulate how it is that I've changed as a result of our friendship. I guess it's coming up on 2 decades if we want to make it sound really, really old.
Really, it's really
Um,
important.
uh, but I know that um, even with the amount of time and effort that I put into my own growth, that there are still ways that I either trick myself or fall prey to the illusion of control. So there are, I certainly have blind spots, and I'm getting better at, I think, quicker and more efficient at identifying and working through those. But I imagine that this is going to be a lifelong process, and I want to continue getting better at that, and having the turnaround time on that be a little quicker. Um,
Sure.
so
I agree
yeah,
with that because I think all of us, it's a lifelong process, and presence especially, and understanding what we're present to is our issue. And that's what intrigued me about your phrase about sleight of self, of how do we hide ourselves from ourselves or from others? Uh, which from a presence point of view is what am I attending to? And then what am I attending to? It goes even further. What am I not willing to be present to? And usually it's about ourself. And um, so that's what intrigued me because I looked it up. I thought, well, I'll find out the nuances by looking it up in a dictionary. And the most common definition of sleight of self, if we use it like sleight of hand, is to deceive. So it's to deceive ourselves, which I would say probably is about half the time, and the other half is we're not willing to be vulnerable and open to somebody else.
So why would I want to do that? Because for me, when when I am aware, when I encounter myself deceiving myself, that's one thing. But it's those times when I'm deceiving myself that it's completely out of my awareness that really gets my attention. So why would I like why does Ken deceive himself? Why
Mostly,
does anybody?
it's it's interesting because it's very core. It's about safety.
With
Almost from the very beginning when we come into the world, we're 100% sensory. The brain's not really kicked in. It's not learned to become an organic intelligence. Um, and so that's why it's so hard for all of us to get back to being fully present. Is we are constantly, the way I like to phrase it is bringing the past into the present so that we can heal it because we are not that child. We are not that person. One of the things that we were chatting before that you brought up, it ties to this. A shift in perception of self-awareness is do it now. But the flip side of that is active inertia, which is my process of learning, well, I can't do that now. I don't want to do that now. And the only way you break that is you take your committed energy, which when you told me about do it now, you boom, you show up regardless of what's going on and you do it now. So I appreciate that because years ago, I don't know if you remember this, but Nike had a commercial with a great big thumb on a big ass poster pointing at you and says, do it now. It
mm,
took me quite a while to figure out why it pissed me off so much.
why was that?
Well, this is back when I was in college. So this is 40, 45, almost 50 years ago. So, but a friend of mine had it at his desk where he was working, and he knew that if he didn't have that poster in front of him, he'd rather go drink a beer.
Yeah.
And he had a goal. He wanted to graduate with his accounting degree and move to Florida, which he did do. Then he graduated, loaded his car up, and said goodbye. I was really committed. But
Mhm.
see, part of the oftentimes our problem is our programming of safety gets in the way of the other side that we're developing, which is what do I want? And then the second part is can I have it? And the third part is what am I willing to do to get it? And if I collapse all that into what you said, which is do it now, you have all those things. And if you don't know what it takes to get there, you're going to go find out. And that's why in the example you were telling me about, you might share a little bit about this as experience about what you and Emily do. I think it's really important. It'd probably also help everybody understand why you're sitting in front of a closet of yarn.
Um, yeah, well, so Emily and I are coming up on 10 years and working. We've been spending a lot of time lately thinking about, looking at ourselves through the lens of being a creative pair. And what's the life cycle of that look like? What have our experiences been like in co-creating together? We have created a business together. We built our house together. We renovated and went on the road with an RV together. Um, and so I think our the level of comfort that we each have with our own creative process is what enables us to go, yeah, let's try that without never having had done it before. Um, and we're getting better and better at uh, working together, like melding our creative processes, but also keeping them separate at the same time. Uh, and so I'm in our studio down at the A.R. Mitchell's Western Art Museum down in Southern Colorado, the A.R. Mitchell Museum, which is fantastic. But we've got this amazing studio, and I'm in Emily's part right now because she's in the other side with Henry, our dog, who would make noise otherwise. but this is part of what we do when we make large scale fiber art installations, um, and create immersive experiences where, we really spend a lot of time thinking about this. But what one of our main goals is to get as close to the sense of awe as we can.
So do you have
Um,
any photographs that you could grab a hold of real quick and share?
um, well, I could tell you what it looks like.
Okay, that works.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the copy of Good Night Moon, and it's basically pages 9 and 10. So it's everything you see in this image, which is the Great Green Room. This is a groundbreaking piece of children's literature that I think is 77 years old now. And it all takes place in this one bedroom. And this installation is 500 square feet, uh, made completely by hand out of yarn using about 152 miles of yarn and over 6 million stitches over about a 6 month period. This is by far our most monumental undertaking. Of course, now we have many more. I turn you around and see the rest of everything that's in this room, but it is definitely a working studio. Um, I say one of the beautiful things about that is, uh, the idea of a creative pair, or the powers of two. Like we're individuals, and then sort of the next version of being creative in the world is with one other person, and we are all a part of that in one way or another. And I like things to go from implicit to explicit and from unconscious to conscious
Sure.
as much as possible. Um, and I think that, working together, with fiber art and installations has been an amazing place for us to practice being creative together in other aspects of our lives. It really gives us the place to be incredibly messy, make lots of mistakes, step on each other's toes, and it gets to be about a thing that we're making rather than the how we are together. Which means that, we can externalize some of the stepping on each other's toes part because it's in service of making this thing rather than defending who we are individually.
Well, the interesting part is
Well,
is
about
is you both have incorporated do it now, but you've done it in such a way it's not force, it's presence.
yeah,
And that's the key thing that most people don't understand is like the reason I didn't like the do it uh, of the Nike commercial or poster was it felt forced.
mhm.
That was my internal experience. And so over the years, then I realized, well, that was because I didn't, I don't like to be told what to do. Something you and I
Mm,
may share.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And but what I realize is it takes presence to have the courage to do what you're doing, which is to do it now. But you're doing it from a creative place. You're doing it from a centered place. You're doing it in relationship with Emily, uh, and so the full impact of that is why it's so fascinating. Because to give this full scope, and I eventually want you to put this in your chat, a website that they could go see or something where they could see what uh, the the depth of what you have done, which is a recreation through all of these. Um, I don't even know how to say it, characters or recreations of childhood into, in some cases, bigger than lifestyle, but the exact size that a child would see it.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating because you said yes to something contrary to conventional thinking, but it tapped into something that touches people deeply.
We could not have planned for that.
Right.
Yeah.
If you listen to your own presence and your own truth, and interestingly, Now you have these results.
Yeah. Well, the just to touch on the do it now part, I could appreciate and have my own version of pushing back against that.
Sure.
And a thread that I could pull a thread from do it now to slide of self. In my own experience, one of the ways that I think that I have or can slight myself is uh, being attached to an outcome. And the before do it now, my a lot of my attention went to, okay, what is the ideal outcome and how do I design for that? Which I think brings in some you know hard fought skills of manipulation, or which I think are safety driven.
Sure.
And thing that the agreement that I have with do it now circumvents the mechanisms that I've put in place throughout the course of my lifetime that would have me not act. I now have an agreement towards doing it now, which supersedes all the safety mechanisms that I've put in place around being safe and fear of failure, or how will I be seen, or what am I doing talking about yarn? This is not who I am, but actually, I think that it is who I am, obviously.
Sure.
Um,
So the thing
one of
is,
the,
you said okay to who you are,
yeah,
even if that seemed like a stranger to you.
absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, as you're aware, I've written a series of novellas called Thoughts, and um, those got done because I said yes to something that I did not see myself as, but I felt a calling to follow. And so the yes is not just do it now. The yes is listening to that other voice inside ourselves that says, why not? Try it, see what happens. And I found it out to be a massive creative experience for me. And um, so, because part of what I appreciate so much for you is you've done the same thing. You've been willing to look at something and say, why not? What's the worst could happen?
Yeah. Which you would think, as a guy who's, been, uh, neck deep in design and has, I've been such an advocate for everything in life being a prototype for whatever else that comes next, and not getting overly attached and falling. Like, even with all of that practice and understanding, I still fall prey to these blind spot influences of falling in love with ideas, or seeing them as, a sacred cow, finished product, not I say one thing and I live out a different thing,
Sure.
if that makes sense. Getting better at it, but I
But
noticed that.
you're picking now. You're realizing it's okay to dream and have visions. But now that something has shifted in you says is, well, let's see if we can make it real. And that's the transition. And when people begin to give themselves permission to be who they are, you've heard me say this, how old do you have to be to give yourself permission to be who you are? And the average person has no idea. And it's however old you are right now, it give yourself permission. And so what I'm appreciating is you've given yourself permission to go do something completely outside of your normal awareness. And look, successful.
Yeah. So I'm happy for myself in
Should be.
all of that. And because it certainly feels good.
Sure.
And um, you know, I I do have I have interest and maybe concern, maybe not concern. I have interest in, for other people who might find themselves pressing up against the glass and not being able to move through the slide of self or the limiting beliefs. And, maybe, if that's a blind spot, how do we, like, what's the formula for identifying our blind spots? And maybe this, leads us into the, what I've learned from you about being the four laws of change. If I want to change the part of myself that slights myself, I first need to become aware that I do it. And then is it, is the four laws of change an appropriate vehicle for moving
Yeah.
through this or beyond that threshold in the hero's journey of this thing?
Yeah, so to help everybody, the four laws of change is if you want a permanent change, the first thing is change has to come within yourself. The second one is you have to have a vision of who are you going to become. Just to say I want to change because I'm unhappy with something, but I have no idea where I'm going to go, it's going to fail. The third thing, which is tying what you're saying, is there has to be a learning, and the learning is how have I been getting in my own way and preventing myself to move forward? And the fourth of the laws, as I was taught by Vic Ordaz, Shawnee Elder, um, is I have to create a healing community. So the best example of most people would relate to is when somebody has a divorce, somebody has a change inside, has a vision of what's going to be, at least partially. They may or may not get their learning until after the fact. Oftentimes, that's when it ends up being a messy divorce. And then finally, they end up with two separate communities. Now, occasionally they share it, but oftentimes that people divide and go different ways. So part of what you're talking about is I call this the calling. I used the word earlier. When there's a calling, a yearning inside ourselves, that's something saying is, I want to change. I want to be, in your case, the artistic side, I want to be born. And if we listen to the calling, it leads to a commitment to explore it, which is, I wonder what that would look like. If I did this, I wonder what it would look like. Or I wonder, you know, I think I'll just wonder until I get a sense of what it will look like. That's beginning the process because you're asking a question in such a way that's going to lead to a learning of what's getting in the way or what's on the other side waiting for you. And it's really how do I focus my attention? And then the fourth part, which you have clearly experienced, is in going through all of that, listening to the commitments that you and Emily put together and creating these artistic projects, you have started to build a community of receptivity
You're
to you and your changes, your ideas, your creativity. So the your most recent artistic project, you share the story about what you did. You called the guy up,
Yeah.
and in doing that, because it's a good idea, a community is revolving around that energy. So whichever you feel comfortable or are able to share, I think it's a good example of how this whole process works.
Yeah. Well, so that's the community of receptivity is something that hadn't come to me. Um, when you were mentioning, community, I was thinking, you know, I have a community of two with Emily. Uh, I'd say I have a community of two with you. Uh, I have a community, with the guys uh, in our men's group, and so that community of receptivity is a new nugget for me. And um, you know, I don't want to put the cart before the horse in sharing too much, but I would say that the that I'll just accept your assertion that this is a wonderful project. Maybe those weren't your exact words, but I do agree with you. I am rather in love with it, and I am in awe of it still. Um, and I think that uh, we'll just say that the level of receptivity in that community outside of us is definitely growing and is starting to include people that it never would have occurred to me to go out and directly invite into that community of receptivity, but they're joining it on their own. Uh,
So
yeah.
we,
So
so when we follow our truth, it's interesting, it attracts.
yeah,
And instead of listening to the naysayers about why you can't do it, you listen to your own internal authority and about why you can do it. And it's not like a life threatening experience. It's not like the world's going to end if whatever you do. It's you're going to find out that you learned a tremendous amount about yourself and your creative expressions, and then it goes further, which is as you begin to get your community of receptivity, which is people who invite what you do into their life. So it's very powerful, and what you're going through is I think is an absolutely amazing situation, and it clearly reflects the four laws of change.
Right. So on the blind spot, if we put blind spots and community together, we, how do I, you know, how does community support me to see my blind spots um, more quickly or without feeling threatened or attacked or diminished, made small, that sort of thing?
But community receptivity, you always have some naysayers, um, but you generally will have people who will come in and make suggestions,
Mm.
and they'll say this, and I'm just going to use your art as something that's distant. So they'll say, is I love your project. I like what you're doing. Have you thought about adding this dimension? And they that receptivity to suggestions or other people's ideas is very helpful. That's how you evolve the creative process. That's how the 16 manuscripts of that I put together on the thoughts books improved in time. People would make suggestions to me, and I was building some receptivity as a community. Our personal issue is anything that has an emotional charge on one side or no charge is something, it's a blind spot.
Sure.
And a way of saying that is the mind in the background has said this isn't safe, so you're not even going to have any awareness of this.
Yeah.
Or if it's surfacing, it will have a big emotional reaction if it gets touched. And what I do is I constantly ask myself, what am I not wanting to see? What am I not willing to see? And I do that in my deep meditations and sometimes it takes a long time, and all of a sudden it pops up, and you go, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." And that's when it finally reveals itself, and then you have a choice. Then what do you want to do with it? So a whole lot of presence is my willingness to look at my own process and how am I hiding from myself, which is why I liked your idea of a slide of self. We all do it, and it's not malicious. We're a perfect response to all the creative adjustments we had to make in life to survive. It's how we create our personality. And then as we go a little bit further, we begin to ask ourselves is, okay, what am I not willing to see? And that's probably my foremost phrase that I use to myself. And frequently, if I have bigger reactions to something, it's something I really don't want to look at. So if I have big emotional reaction, how do we solve it? We blame the other person. And then I get curious and say, I wonder why I am reacting to that the way I am. And if I stay with it, then I begin to unravel whatever anger, hurt, or misunderstanding, or whatever else it is, and realize that generally speaking, it was an adjustment. That's all it was, creative adjustment to survive. Um, and if I can hold that, I create the energy that to now face it directly and realize I don't need that anymore. And if I start to have it, I'll catch myself because I'm aware of it. But you can't be human and not have blind sides. I mean, everybody has them.
Sure.
You know, should I? We're not the Dalai Lama, okay? And I'm not so sure he doesn't have some blind spots, but that's beside the point.
Sure he does.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I mean, I have to say that one of the things that has changed for me is I've come to enjoy them. Um, maybe I enjoy the discovery of them more than I do the existence.
Sure.
Um, and I would say, within the context of the guys that I meet with a couple times a month, we have, and this is straight out of my time spent with you as part of Natural Passages, is we have an agreement. It's an explicit agreement which gets reinforced somewhat regularly, as it's an important reminder, which is, this group is challenge and support, um, with the aim of becoming, let's just say, stronger.
Sure.
So, I share something that's up for me, in this group, and they know me well enough, and I know that they care about me, and that we have this agreement that, if they challenge me on something, that I know that they're doing it so that I can become stronger, or let's say see this blind spot more clearly.
Sure.
But because we have that agreement in place, I don't get defensive.
Right.
Um, and
That's
grown to.
90% of it, Ken, what you just pointed out, is you've developed a trust and an agreement with them that they can say things and you know it's not intended to hurt you. It's intended to support you to see yourself. And, you're very blessed because you guys have been together, what, 10 years?
Emily,
No,
or
you guys.
I think we're coming up on 6. I'm not really the timekeeper like that. That's more Sean and Steve. That's everybody else does a good job of reminding me what
Right.
our
Just
anniversary.
just like you and Emily, but both of you have built a relationship of you understand I care about you and I'm not here to hurt you. And when you develop that safety inside yourself, regardless of where you're at, and one of the things I want to take a second here to add to that, if I am more present and trust myself, I don't not only have to react, I don't have to accept anything emotional that's thrown at me. So things that have triggered me in the past do not trigger me at the present the way just simply because uh, that energy, that approach doesn't affect me that way, and it completely dissolves if they are being aggressive to me. It completely dissolves because I didn't react the way they thought. They thought they could get a stir out of me and we get into a fight. And my usual response if they really push on me is I just name it. I'll say, just so you understand, I'm pissed. Now, you want to
I
carry that?
learned the receipt from
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And then I asked, do you want to proceed?
Yeah.
And the person usually realizes because they suddenly got present, because what I said was present, it allowed us now to have a conversation that would have been totally different.
Mhm.
So naming it oftentimes is our capacity to be present enough to just name what's going on without going into the reactivity shifts everything. We just we have clarity. What's mine, what's yours? What do we want to create together? So it's not saying that there won't be tense moments because, we're human. So I often say we're God's folly. We're down here for entertainment purposes.
Yes.
And by having that kind of attitude, I realize why are we taking it all so serious?
Mhm.
So,
Well, um, this kind of feels like we're on the on the threshold of talking about intimacy. When we've got this agreement in place, and we're present. You want to Should we dip into intimacy as from the definition of intimacy that I've adopted from my time with you is sort of the coexistence of vulnerability and presence.
correct.
And I can say that that exists in my relationship with Emily, with you, with the guys, and but I'd like to hear more from you on how, getting into intimacy, because we have this presence part and we're vulnerable. Could you unpack that a little bit?
So what I'm thinking is this would be a good time to stop and we can do a part two,
All right.
a whole session on intimacy.
Sure.
If you're interested in that, because part of it is I'm kind of time bound today.
Sure.
So yeah, so let's put it out there to everybody that the next one is we're going to talk about the layers of intimacy because there are what I call three stages, and one of them is what you've talked about, which is how do I get fully present, allow enough vulnerability, which is if I'm present, I can be safe, lean into the discomfort and connect, which is where I connect. Because my belief is this: I think from the day we're born, we seek intimacy, and intimacy is a human heart to heart connection, which is probably the purest form of intimacy. So I would love to. We can schedule that and have that conversation. Okay.
Yeah. So if I were going to wrap this up, around, slide of self, starts out with an awareness um, that I have self-imposed limiting beliefs, or maybe I'm putting too much stock in external authority. The four laws of change. The second one stood out for me as some clarity around how I want to be different. And, it occurs to me that clarity around how I'm tired of being how I am might also be enough of a catalyst, to move through those four laws of change. And, community being one of those, presence being one of those.
Well, if you expand your idea of community to community of receptivity, you begin to understand that a community is somebody who shares a common appreciation for something, whether it be you, your ideas, your creativity. Generally, it's all those things. That's why people gravitate towards something. So I think those are all good things for you to take as well as everybody that might be listening here. So I do want to move forward. So um, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank
I
you.
look forward to the next one we'll do on intimacy and have a good one. Okay. I'm Herb Stevenson,
Ken Chapin.
and we appreciate your time and to listen to us. Take care and be well. Bye bye. Cool.